On December 8, 2023, the judge of the British Columbia Provincial Court in Canada announced the verdict. Ibrahim Ali, the defendant in the murder case of Chinese girl Shen Xiaoyu, was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for 25 years. This can be considered a reassuring outcome, as the marathon-like trial spanning 6.5 years has finally come to a close. However, it's also a much belated judgment, leaving the victim's family and those seeking justice waiting for 6 long years. If Xiaoyu were alive today, she would be almost 20 years old. This is a case where justice, although delayed, remains victorious. Today, let's revisit and analyze the case of Shen Xiaoyu's murder. Her English name is Marissa Shen. During this trial, the court imposed a media blackout, prohibiting the public disclosure of the trial's proceedings and details. However, resources can still be found online from people who queued for the trial or connected via phone. A murder case garnering such attention isn't unprecedented, such as the Simpsons case, which I will cover later. However, the name Shen Xiaoyu resonates throughout Canada, particularly among the Chinese community. The wound is deep. Unlike the previous two cases, the situation with Xiaoyu's case is different. The perpetrator was arrested 5 years ago, with overwhelming evidence against him. However, the trial was delayed until now, with the added complication of a key witness passing, creating a case within a case. Outside the courtroom, tension ran high, with the Chinese community holding street protests. Many other ethnic groups joined, directing their frustration toward Canada's immigration policies. Some even believe that alongside the perpetrator, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau should be on trial too. They believe that it is because of his push for lenient refugee acceptance policies that this tragedy unfolded. Now, let's delve into the details. It all began with a disappearance on the evening of 2017. On July 18th, just past 11 p.m., a mother in the city of Burnaby, British Columbia, reported that her 13-year-old daughter, Shen Xiaoyu, was missing and her phone was switched off. Initially, the police didn't take it seriously, assuming the girl might be out with friends or her phone had died prior. However, the mother, anxious, insisted that her daughter always return home before 8 p.m. At her urging, the police checked the girl's phone GPS, which last pinged in Central Park about an hour earlier. The park was nearby and is a popular hangout spot for locals at night. After learning this, the police became even more certain of their initial assessment. The anxious mother insisted that the police accompany her to the park to search for her daughter. 2 police officers reluctantly followed her to the location where the last signal was detected. By then, it was close to midnight, and the 3 of them, wielding flashlights, searched back and forth several times but found no sign of anyone. The police advised the mother to return home and wait for their call. Less than an hour later, a patrol officer in the southeast area of the park discovered a cartoon wallet shaped like a pink owl and a switched-off phone near a small path. A white piece of paper lay a meter away. Upon picking that up, they found it was a student ID with the name Marissa on it. The officer immediately reported the discovery to the station. The dispatcher entered the surname Shen into the computer and immediately retrieved record of Shen Xiaoyu's mother's report, made over 2 hours ago. It wasn't until then that the missing person case truly called the police's attention. They began deploying more resources to Central Park and alerted search team for help. At 1:10 a.m. in the morning, the police found Shen Xiaoyu's body just tens of meters away from their original location. The forensics estimated that the girl had died 3 hours earlier, around 10 o'clock that night. On this muggy night, Xiaoyu's life was forever frozen at 13. She didn't make it to the September school reopening. Naturally, the most heartbroken was Xiaoyu's mother. After discovering her daughter's disappearance, she made nearly 40 consecutive phone calls. At the funeral held in early August, Xiaoyu's mother cried until she couldn't stand, continuously caressing her daughter lying in the coffin, as if trying to gently wake her up as she did every morning. The mother and daughter immigrated to Canada a year ago, relying on each other for survival. To provide a better life for Xiaoyu, who was about to start middle school, her mother had to work several jobs, often until nightfall. Xiaoyu, too, was obedient and sensible. During the summer vacation, after attending morning cram school classes, she would usually walk home to cook. In the afternoon, she would either play with her phone or do crafts at home, occasionally going out to nearby cafes for free Wi-Fi, always returning home before dark. The police retrieved surveillance footage from Xiaoyu's apartment and the vicinity of Burnaby's Central Park, focusing on the period between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m. The footage shows Xiaoyu leaving the apartment around 6 p.m. and entering a nearby Tim Hortons cafe, where she seemed relaxed while enjoying snacks, drink, and using her phone. After about an hour and a half, she left, tidying up the table before leaving and politely holding the glass door for an elderly person entering. By 7:40 p.m., if she were to be home by 8 p.m., the quickest route was through the Burnaby Central Park. However, this path was entirely within the surveillance blind spot. From satellite imagery, This path appeared dense with trees, lacked any streetlight, and was rarely traversed at night, making it the final stretch of Xiaoyu's brief life. Several hours later, her body was found at a location marked in red on the map, right in the middle of this path. What exactly happened during the hour between her disappearance and her demise? The police did not disclose. From a later autopsy report released by the court, it showed that her shorts were removed, and there were varying degrees of tearing and injuries to the lower body and vagina. The cause of death was mechanical asphyxia. It's difficult to imagine the torture and despair she experienced before death. Amidst public anger, panic quickly spread. Young women dare not venture out alone at night, and parents with daughters began taking them to and from school daily, some even suspending summer tutoring classes. Faced with such societal pressures, the police were pressed to find the perpetrator. The secluded nature of this path, devoid of cameras and deserted at night, with no eyewitnesses, posed a challenge. Despite questioning over 2,000 people, including nearby residents, no valuable clues were found. Furthermore, due to the accumulation of stones and fallen leaves at the crime scenes, complete footprints could not be extracted, and no suspicious hair, fingerprints, or clothing fibers were found. The only evidence linking to the perpetrator was the semen DNA sample found inside the victim. Yet, no matches were found in a criminal database. While the police were at a standstill with the DNA sample, the perpetrator entered the dormant period, refraining from causing further crime. Consequently, the police resorted to soliciting clues from the public. The police investigated over 90 suspects, but each was ruled out due to DNA mismatches. As the year drew to a close, the real culprit remained elusive. Residents of Burnaby, especially the Chinese community, began putting up numerous posters on the streets, particularly near Central Park, reminding people to stay vigilant. "Murderer on the loose" was written boldly. Especially upon learning that the city government had not installed cameras in Central Park, a group of Chinese volunteers, comprised of young men and elderly gentlemen, formed a voluntary patrol team. They rode bicycles back and forth along the park's path every day, ensuring the safety of women and children. Eventually, the police pinned their hope on a technology that's still in the experimental stage, which can reconstruct one's face from DNA samples. DNA phenotyping, also known as Snapshot DNA. Simply put, scientists could analyze DNA samples to digitally recreate the perpetrator's facial features, including hair color, height, ethnicity, gender, and even facial structure, aiding in identifying the suspect. Eventually, forensic science can use DNA to create a virtual mugshot of the suspect's face. However, as we all know, a person's appearance can change due to environmental factors or age. Both academia and public opinion express skepticism toward this technology, citing its low accuracy and propensity for wrongful arrests. Moreover, concerns were raised about privacy infringement and abuse of law enforcement powers. As a result, despite being studied for over a decade, Snapshot DNA remained on the fringe of forensic mainstream, lacking recognition. It wasn't until recently that this technology experienced an unexpected breakthrough. The technology was used in Golden State Killer case, who, after more than 40 years on the run, was eventually arrested. Upon comparing the genetic phenotype with the actual person, it was revealed that, excluding the fuller cheeks and receding hairline, especially in facial feature size, shape, proportions, and even the creases on either side, bearing at least an 80% resemblance. The facial features and skin tone depicted in the genetic profile were remarkably consistent, truly showcased the reliability of this technology. Burnaby's investigators, responsible for Xiaoyu case, found renewed hope from the police. It hasn't been more than a year since the extraction of DNA samples, so there should not be issues where weight gain or hair loss might alter the suspect's appearance drastically. Consequently, the accuracy of the genetic phenotype technology was significantly enhanced. According to the genetic phenotype, the perpetrator who killed Xiaoyu was estimated to be between 25 and 35 years old, with dark hair and matching eyebrows, light brown skin, a slender face with a long nose, and a distinctive groove on the chin. Moreover, the DNA analysis clearly indicated that the individual originated from the Middle East, specifically the northern regions, including Syria, Lebanon, northern Turkey, and a small area of Iraq. With this information, the pool of suspects narrowed significantly. To avoid stirring racial discrimination issues, the police refrained from publicly releasing the genetic phenotype. Instead, they discreetly shared it with some local Middle Eastern communities and organizations, encouraging them to provide clues while urging young men resembling the suspect to voluntarily offer DNA samples to both assist in solving the case and clear their own names. However, the police understood that the real perpetrator would not give up his sample voluntarily. Nevertheless, catching one or two of his close relatives in this net will lead to him. Indeed, luck was on their side. In August 2018, the laboratory responsible for testing received news that among the over 300 voluntarily provided samples, there was a filial match. However, it wasn't a direct relative, but within 3 generations. Upon hearing this news, the police felt both excited and somewhat disappointed. After all, the Middle Eastern community was known for its large families, with numerous cousins and relatives. If they were to investigate each one individually, who knows how long it would take to find a perpetrator. But soon, another piece of information emerged, reinvigorating the police. The investigation revealed that the family of the individual who provided the matching sample had only one male member in Canada who meet all the criteria in the genetic phenotyping. As it turned out, this family had arrived in Canada as refugees from Syria just over a year ago, so they hadn't had a chance to establish extensive family connections, saving the police significant time and effort. The lone suspect, named Ibrahim Ali, or simply Ali for short, was 28 years old, unmarried, and worked as an exterior wall decorator for a construction company, with no prior criminal record. A year ago, he rented an apartment within a kilometer from Central Park, where Xiaoyu was murdered. The police wasted no time. They patiently waited and retrieved a DNA sample from his discarded trash, and upon analysis, found it to be a perfect match for the one found inside Xiaoyu's body. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, the police promptly arrested him and leveled a first-degree murder charge against him. After a year and 2 months, the real culprit was finally found. However, what people didn't anticipate was the beginning of a 5-year legal nightmare. Firstly, despite mainstream media's efforts to downplay the perpetrator's refugee background, it still stirred up a significant public outcry. The main reason for this is that some people have questioned Canada's policy on accepting 25,000 Syrian refugees, fearing that the action will burden the economy and pose security risk. However, at the time, Canadian Prime Minister Trudeau had reassured the public, pledging to ensure the safety of all Canadians. To demonstrate his commitment, the Trudeau government publicly announced the condition for refugee acceptance, emphasizing prioritizing women and children, allowing men to stay behind in Syria to protect their homeland. But here's where the story gets interesting. How did Ali, at the prime age of 28 and unmarried, end up in Canada? The media delved into this, uncovering a tale reminiscent of Aesop's The Farmer and the Viper. It turns out Ali came to Canada through a form of private sponsorship, distinct from the government's refugee program. The immigration and subsequent costs will be covered by the individuals, groups, or organizations. Some examples include accommodation, resettlement, medical care, and food, enabling the sponsored individual to enter Canada through a fast-track refugee approval process without meeting specific requirements of gender, age, or family background. Although this pay-to-play approach seems straightforward, it is no walk in the park, especially for an average family of 3. The required sponsorship amount ranges from 80,000 to 100,000 Canadian dollars annually, varying based on the cost of living in the Canadian city they settle in, and maybe even higher. The sponsorship period must last at least 1 year, up to a maximum of 3 years. Despite the hefty price tag, Canadians' innate kindness and overflowing compassion shine through. According to information released by CBC, a joint sponsorship from St. Andrew's Wesley United Church and Bowen Island residents supported the Syrian refugee family of 6. They chose this family primarily because they had relatives living on Bowen Island, and some were members of that church. After the outbreak of Syrian war, they believed that going through the government's refugee program would take too long and face stiff competition. They had a great campaign and news coverage. Soon after, the tragic story of Syrian family displaced by war made front page of the local newspaper on Bowen Island, accompanied by photos of Syria reduced to rubble by artillery fire, eliciting both sympathy from local residents and a flood of donations. The church, echoing the pastor's sentiment that their family is our family, encouraged people to donate, equating it with a donation to God, prompting generous contributions. Together, in a short time, they raised 650,000 Canadian dollars. They found a house on the island for the family, furnished it, rented a car, and enrolled their children in daycare centers and schools. They even thought of details such as airport transportation. The donations actually exceeded the sponsorship amount by $50,000. The relative had an idea. Hey, I have a single brother in our family, let's add a bit more and bring him over too. And that brother, who was showered with a package deal of accommodation, airfare, and generous assistance from local residents, was none other than Ali, Xiaoyu's murderer. On March 2, 2017, this party of 7 arrived in Canada, greeted not only by their relatives, but also representatives from the church and island community. Their photo taken at the Vancouver airport was featured in a local newspaper the next day, hailed as a heartwarming story that touched Canada. However, unlike his brother's family, Ali didn't settle down quietly on the island. Instead, he used the living expenses donated to him to enroll in an English course in the bustling city of Burnaby, rented a small apartment, and lived a life of comfort. Housing, education, and money, all provided. A life of luxury that many international students dream of but can't achieve even with part-time jobs. For Ali, everything came too easy. Just 4 months after arriving, he succumbed to his desires and harmed the innocent Xiaoyu. What's even more infuriating is that just 3 months before Ali was arrested, he was invited back to Bowen Island to celebrate his 1-year anniversary in Canada with his brother's family. This event made headlines again, giving him yet another moment in the spotlight. In the photo, he appeared more relaxed than the year before, making it unimaginable that he had already taken an innocent life. This heart-wrenching story of the murderer who touched Canada quickly sparked a wave of discussion, with fingers pointed at Prime Minister Trudeau. After all, he had assured the public that accepting a large number of refugees wouldn't pose a threat to society. Facing criticisms and questioning from various quarters, Trudeau eventually responded to an interview. What did he say?
One is asking what you have to say about the arrest in British Columbia of Ibrahim Ali, who is a Syrian refugee, following the murder of a teenage girl named Marissa Shen.
Obviously, it's devastating news for her family, for her friends. It's a terrible tragedy. Anytime someone is murdered, it's a terrible thing. I trust our justice system. I trust our system to go through its processes to both apply consequences to this and to make sure that we're thinking about how we continue to keep people safe.
One can only say that these words sound professional, leaving no room for criticisms. However, it sounds like they're saying everything but nothing at the same time. What's most criticized in the video is Trudeau's several smirks during the brief 1-minute speech, a smile that seemed suppressed, making the whole demeanor awkward. Consequently, several media outlets reported on Trudeau's first response to the smiling reaction to the murder of a Chinese girl, once again stirring public condemnation. However, some pointed out that throughout the more than 60-minute interview, Trudeau maintained the same half smile, neither smiling or frowning, with a noticeable tilt to one side of his face. He seemed more like an excessive Botox injection, unrelated to Xiaoyu's case and hardly constituting discrimination against Chinese. Thereafter, the Trudeau smile or not became a hotly debated topic, with both sides having intense arguments online. Regardless of Trudeau's facial expressions, his apparent indifference and bureaucratic responses to the issue are undeniable. It's almost as if "it's not my government's plan, it's not my concern" was written all over his face. So, how did Trudeau's trusted legal system handle this case? Firstly, Ali refused the second-degree murder plea agreement proposed by the prosecution and insisted on pleading not guilty. For this, he went through 5 lawyers, determined to find one who could secure his release in court. Because Ali couldn't afford a lawyer, all his appointed attorneys were provided by legal aid for free. But free is only for Ali. The lawyers themselves charge fees, which are covered by Canadian governments, but these money are ultimately from the taxpayer. The final attorney chosen, Kevin McCullough, boasts 30 years of experience specializing in cases of sexual assault, murder, and other heinous crime. According to information provided by his law firm, his fee is $300 Canadian per hour, which can increase significantly depending on the complexity of the case. With each round, the attorney must reread all case files, adding to the cost and potentially delaying proceedings due to the attorney's purported lack of understanding and unpreparedness. As one can imagine, the money spent on legal fees for Ali has already reached astronomical levels compared to what affluent individual might pay for legal representation. However, Ali's need for a translator is even more ridiculous. He claims not only to be unable to speak English or French, but also lacks proficiency in Arabic, the official language of Syria. His only linguistic skill is in Kurdish, a minority language, and even then he can only speak and understand but not read or write. The situation is quite baffling, and might be interpreted as another delay tactic. While there are Kurdish translators certified in Canada, they are exceedingly rare and charge exorbitant fees. Due to the language barrier, every interaction between Ali and his lawyer necessitates a translator, leading to delays as they wait for translation services. And with translators being paid by the hour, longer proceedings mean more earnings for them. For Ali, every moment lost waiting is counted toward his sentence with a multiplier. However, there's no price tag for lost time, especially when it comes to Ali's prolonged incarceration awaiting trial. This time spent waiting can offset his eventual formal sentence. From his arrest in 2018 to the trial in 2023, those 5 years equate to 7.5 in reality. Truly a case of making the most out of a dire situation. As the courtroom drama unfolds, it becomes clear that justice delayed is not justice denied. It's simply justice becoming complicated. Despite all the delays and setbacks, the trial eventually commenced in April 2023, nearly 6 years after Xiaoyu's murder. During this lengthy hiatus, a bench commemorating Xiaoyu was placed in the Central Park where she last visited, inscribed with a poignant message: "In this life or next, we will hold hand again." The sight of Xiaoyu's mother, overwhelmed with grief, serves as a reminder of the void left behind. On April 5th, 2023, the trial of Xiaoyu's case finally began. However, it was not without further complication and twist. From From translator testing positive for COVID-19 to jury members facing personal tragedies, the trial faced numerous delays. Meanwhile, Ali capitalized on these opportunities to disrupt proceedings, claiming mental health issues and seeking adjournments. After 5 months of delays, tragedy struck outside of courtroom as Dr. Tracy Pickett, the forensic expert for the prosecution, was found dead in a wooded area not far from where Xiaoyu was murdered. The police ruled her death suicide, citing her continuing battle with depression, which are evoked by Xiaoyu's murder. However, the circumstances surrounding Dr. Pickett's death remain contentious. Friends and family assert her commitment to seeking treatment for depression and note her positive trajectory. As a former director of the BC Women's Hospital Sexual Assault Center and chair of the Forensic Pathology Association, it's unlikely she succumbed to the pressures of the case. Despite these suspicions, the police concluded their investigation, attributing Dr. Pickett's death to suicide. Meanwhile, Ali's defense attorney seized on the opportunity to request a mistrial, citing the loss of a key witness. However, after careful consideration, the judge decided to proceed with the trial, although striking Dr. Pickett's testimony from the record. As the trial continued, Ali's defense took a reprehensible turn, resorting to baseless accusations against the deceased. The attorney insinuated that Xiaoyu was a troubled girl, estranged from her family, and possibly engaged in illicit activities to earn money, such as being an escort. Such tactics were not only unethical, but also aimed at deflecting blame from the defendant. These unfounded allegations sparked outrage among the Chinese community, prompting protests against the injustice and insults directed at the victim. Despite the defense's attempts to smear Xiaoyu's character, the prosecution countered, highlighting the loving and concerned nature of Xiaoyu's family, who spared no effort in searching for her and attending every court session. As for the claims of Xiaoyu staying out late or meeting in the park during the Lantern Festival, they are baseless. If Xiaoyu hadn't aimed to return home before 8 p.m., she likely wouldn't have taken the path through the park, thus avoiding Ali's fatal encounter. Consider the defense attorney's scenario. Ali has consensual sex with Xiaoyu, leaves, and then another murderer coincidentally discovers and kills her. The probability of this happening is incredibly low. The prosecution attorney requested the jury to hold their breath for 2 minutes to experience the suffocating length of time it took for Ali to snuff out Xiaoyu's life by covering her mouth and nose until her death, a chilling aspect of this case. In the face of the prosecution's dismantling arguments, the defense made one last desperate attempt. Just a moment before the jury was set to deliver their verdict, the defense attorney claimed to have received death threats and presented a letter allegedly left in his mailbox, threatening gruesome fates for him and his family. The letter, both in its content and grammar, resembled what colloquially termed Chinglish, leading the attorney to believe that it was from supporters of Xiaoyu's family. The defense then argued that the external influence had compromised the jury's impartiality, demanding an immediate halt to the trial, a nullification of the jury's conclusion, and a retrial at a later date. The judge swiftly denied this unreasonable request, advising the attorney to report any harassment or threats to law enforcement. The trial proceeded, and Ali was ultimately convicted of first-degree murder by the jury, receiving a life sentence with no chance of parole for 25 years. Ali had little reaction to the verdict. Although it took a marathon of back and forth for the case to finally come to a close, Ibrahim eventually reaped what he sowed.